Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. Each week, we speak with top influencers, marketers, and brands who share their experiences, strategies, and tactics for influencer marketing in China. Here's your host, Lauren Hallanan.
Hi, everyone. The China Influencer Marketing Podcast is back. It's been a couple weeks since I've gotten an episode out, and that kills me. My Chinese in-laws were visiting the U.S. for the past month, which meant that a couple of things had to go on the back burner. But they've left, and now the podcast is back with a bang. I've got several awesome episodes coming out over the next few weeks, so you're definitely going to want to tune in. To kick things off, I've got one of our favorite guests, or at least one of my favorite guests, Elijah Whaley, back on the podcast to talk about a really valuable but often overlooked topic, which is how to get the most out of your KOL campaigns with SSO, or social search optimization. Elijah and I recently co-wrote a piece on this for the PARKLU blog, but I really wanted to have him on the podcast so we could discuss it further. I've also included a link to the article in the show notes, so you can go back and take a look. During the second half of the podcast, we switch gears and he and I chat about some recent Chinese social media news, including the recent Weishi controversy, which involves Tencent's video platform Weishi, who has been accused of withholding payment from content creators. So we go into and we explain what's going on with that situation and kind of our thoughts on it. Also, we discuss some of the ongoing content crackdowns on some different social media channels and what brands need to be aware of. I always have such a good time talking to Elijah. He provides so much value, and I know you're going to get a lot from this episode. If you do like this episode, or any of the episodes for that matter, please share the podcast. And if you're feeling super nice, you could also leave a rating and review on iTunes or whatever podcast player you prefer. But sharing with people in your network who might find this podcast valuable is really the best thing you can do, and I would be very, very grateful. It's a super niche topic, and it can be difficult to get the word out there. Before we start, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, PARKLU. PARKLU is China's premier influencer marketing platform. Learn more at parklu.com. And now, onto our interview with Elijah. Hi, Elijah. Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. Or maybe I should say welcome back to the Influencer Marketing Podcast.
I know.
Really
yeah,
excited to have you.
Number 3, isn't it?
Yeah, number 3.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about some of these subjects we got planned.
Yeah, so like we were talking ahead of time, there are a couple topics, some things that have been going on lately, and then just some things that brands should know, and so I really want to dive into this today. So I want to just get straight into it. We published an article recently about the idea of that your KOL strategy in China can be used to improve your rankings on some search engines. So essentially SEO, SSO, using your KOL posts. And I would just really love to discuss the topic more. I mean, I think the article is pretty comprehensive, but I just would love to dive into this topic more because, before we had discussed it and wrote the article about it, I really didn't know anything about the topic. So I feel like there's probably a lot of people who don't know anything about it either.
Sure. Yeah, well, in some ways, this is just more about a topic that we've discussed from early days about a more holistic approach to KOL marketing and how you can repurpose content in all sorts of ways and really trying to maximize, hey, if you're going to work with a KOL, work with them not in a traditional just sponsor the post kind of way, but integrate them in all sorts of ways. I believe everywhere from product marketing and developing of products, all the way now to, really maximizing that collaboration for long-term value. And so it's really fun to be able to finally also have some real proof of the value of using KOLs for something like SEO. And so that piece, is quite comprehensive. But I think to start to just kind of give a general overview on what is happening and how to utilize this. So most people have a pretty good understanding of SEO and good SEO practices. And SEO in China and on Baidu is very, very similar to Google. There's obviously some things that are different, and Google, and even for me, I've had to do some research recently because I really enjoy SEO, and that's something that we try and utilize, for our own content that we produce at PARKLU on both Chinese and English stuff. But one of the big differences, and I think this is something that's also useful in the KOL world, is Baidu gives some preferential treatment to new content. They seem to really like not just stuff that is well designed for SEO, but is a refresh of a subject, and give some preferential treatment to that. And when you're working with KOLs and social media, you're obviously constantly publishing new stuff. And so Baidu actually gives preferential treatment to new stuff, as long as it also aligns with all the other SEO type criteria. And that can mean, length of the content and how you utilize keywords and backlinking and such. And so, but maybe just to backtrack a little bit. So in China, we have, SEO, and that's been around for a long time, traditional search engines, whether it be Baidu or Sogu or 360. But those were all designed for desktops. And in the adoption of mobile phones and mobile internet, even in the West, traditional search engines have kind of suffered a little bit because the user experience just isn't that great. Opening up that browser and trying to type in that little space and search for your results, it's just not the same user experience as a desktop. And just like China does with many things, they're kind of leapfrogging certain technologies and certain behaviors on the internet. And so we have talked about for a while, and there's a few people that talk about it, SSO, which is social search optimization. And there's a really good prediction, and it continues to be enriched, that WeChat, and I believe this, will be the next big search engine. And what that means is I can go into WeChat even today, and I can type in a keyword, and I can see things that are related to my contacts. I can see conversations that have had that keyword in it, private conversations. I can see moments. I can see, now I can see mini programs. I can actually see content from the internet itself through their adoption of like an Sogu search engine type API thing. And then just very, very recently, I think just in the last couple of days, they've released total integration with JD.com. So when you put in, a cell phone, you're also going to have e-commerce results pop up. And this is really, really powerful, really, really interesting stuff. So what the opportunity is here is as you're working with a KOL, say on WeChat, if you're optimizing that content, meaning using keywords and also, researching keywords, knowing that these are keywords that are popular in search, which you can use that. You can use different things like Baidu Index and WeChat's Index to discover keywords usage and the popularity of them and whether they're trending up or trending down and how much they get searched on a regular basis. And you can integrate that into the titles and you can integrate that into throughout the content. There needs to be a certain amount of weight to the keyword usage in the content, and it's very similar to Google or anywhere else, where it needs to be about like 0.05% of the article needs to have that mention. So it's kind of like one keyword use every 50 words or something like that, or every 100 words, or maybe that would be 1%, every 200 words. And so if you start to use these regular practices, you can really leverage this content in really special ways, because it's going to start to come up in these search engines which are being more and more used. And as WeChat enriches this search capability, I believe that it will be adopted more widely. And then in other cases where you have, say, like even a Weibo, what's special about Weibo is, yes, people are also searching for content on Weibo, but all of Weibo's posts are indexed by the major search engines in China. And so again, and Weibo doesn't have the traditional Twitter limit to 140 characters or something. That hasn't been around for a long time. And so if KOLs are writing long form content with keywords packed into there, they can actually rank very well, very, very well on Baidu, because the platform itself has really great domain authority. And you can start to use these tactics in all, you should be using them in all of your campaigns. And it's a really wonderful opportunity. One of the other really big ones and really great ones we've seen is Xiaohongshu, which Xiaohongshu has already become, or the Little Red Book, or Red, that's commonly called, is already used very widely as a product research platform for cross-border companies and products. And so you should already be optimizing that content for Xiaohongshu's already internal search engine. But again, it's just like Weibo, where it is being integrated, or it's being indexed by Baidu, and there's just really, really fabulous opportunities there to rank highly on search engines.
Okay, so you said WeChat and Weibo, Xiaohongshu. Are there any other platforms that you know of that are really good for SEO, that are like you said, being indexed or are being frequently used by Chinese consumers as a search engine of sorts?
Well, most of the social platforms, actually excluding Douyin and I believe maybe Kuaishou too, are indexed. However, because of their limited ability to put in text, and I don't know why, but if you search for content related to MeiPai or MiaoPai or some of these other platforms, they don't seem to rank as well. And I think it's really it's really about, and especially in the video platforms too, so the Yokus and things like that. They don't rank as well. And a lot of that has to do with when you're creating content for these platforms, it's video content. And commonly when you produce or publish a video, the KOLs aren't also writing lengthy articles. And just like classic SEO, you need to have some meaty text in there for those search engines to scrape that information to know how to index it properly. And they don't do voice search and things like that. I think that one of the tactics that I know YouTubers use on YouTube is to actually transcribe the entire video, and they'll put that in the comments, and that can actually help a lot with SEO and ranking on Google and in the internal search engine in YouTube. So potentially that tactic is available there also, but I myself have never practiced that or seen results from it.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately a lot of the Chinese video platforms have very limited they limit the amount of text that you
Correct.
can put, so that wouldn't really be applicable for all of them, but something worth trying if there are any that can do that. I think another one that I heard of, I heard that Zhihu. Zhihu's not applicable for all brands. It's good for a lot of B2B and maybe some bigger brand. Oh, I think there's a lot of brands that could be using Zhihu. It's just not talked about as much. But I heard that Zhihu, especially because it has a lot of really high quality, in-depth content, written content, that also can rank really well on Baidu searches too.
Yeah, absolutely. Zhihu and Douban, and there's a few others. And actually, that's one of the tactics that we used at PARKLU is that if, say you're working with a KOL that's just writing a WeChat article for you, because that WeChat article is not going to be indexed by Baidu, you can essentially take that exact same article and pop it up on Zhihu and make sure that it's optimized properly and rank very, very well, because Zhihu is just like the Western equivalent, which is called, it's escaping me right now.
Quora or?
Quora. Yeah. And Quora articles and Quora content ranks extremely well on Google, and it's because they have really strong domain authority. They're really perfect for how the titles and the content is structured for the search engines, and then also some of the social interaction and social sharing and such. So yeah, Zhihu is a really, really wonderful opportunity actually for repurposing KOL content, because even if you're not working with a KOL on the platform, you can always take that content, and you probably should be taking that content and distributing it in other places. And, that's one of the things we've talked about is the repurposing of KOL content, because, hey, you paid for it to be made. You might as well maximize its use.
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to clarify something for WeChat articles, because you were talking about WeChat earlier. So WeChat articles can be, like you said, WeChat is also, a search engine. So, but then you also just said then that WeChat articles are not going to be indexed. So could you just clarify kind of the difference? So if you're working with like a WeChat influencer, how could you use that in the sense of like SEO, or is that just like trying to get it to come up on WeChat's own search engine?
Yeah. So years ago, Tencent made a 15% investment in Sogu. And so Sogu actually does index WeChat articles.
Okay.
However,
gotcha.
Sogu is only like 2% of the search engine market. So it's a really, really low, rarely used search engine. But WeChat itself indexes and makes its own content searchable. And it also, WeChat search will also display Sogu content, which is the greater internet that Sogu is indexing. So there's kind of an integration both ways. However, I would almost assume that as far as search engine use goes, that WeChat has a greater usage than Sogu does. I don't actually have the numbers on that, because I don't think they're ranking WeChat that way.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that clears things up. Definitely. So you kind of mentioned that, it needs to be long form content. You need to be putting keywords in similar to, what you would do with SEO on Google. As far as like long form, how long is long form? Like, is there a minimum that you would say for the content?
Yeah, so the minimum that we've heard and we suggest is 300 plus characters, but the reality is the more the better. And you need to dictate that to the KOL. If you want this content to be optimized for SEO, you need to put into your campaign brief to them that, hey, I want an article with 300, and even better, 500 plus characters. I think that's the sweet spot, actually, is 500 plus characters. I need the article to be 500 plus characters, which is a lot. I mean, that's pretty lengthy, especially for a social post. But if you want to maximize that relationship and that sponsorship, then that's what you need to do. And so 500 plus characters, again, you're going to need, KOLs, they're not SEO specialists. They don't know anything about keywords. You need to dictate all of that. And you can't just guess what are the good keywords. You want to, do some research and know what's out there. And then also, one of the things that you can pay to do, or you can have someone on your team do, is, and this is very traditional, it's actually how the real authority of an article or of what we call page authority is backlinks. And so that means that you could have a social post from Weibo or Xiaohongshu, and you actually develop backlinks to that content from different platforms. And because when a page has backlinks from another website or from another page, what that page is saying is that this content on this page is very valuable. It's so valuable that I'm linking to it because I consider it to be important. And that actually the search engines then say, oh, this is an important piece of content, and that increases its rank.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting too. And I don't think a lot of people are thinking about that at all, or thinking that they can do that. So that's something really important to point out. I also just want to take kind of a broader view and discuss, like, why does it matter that your brand shows up in search engine results? If you're paying this KOL to talk about your product, shouldn't that be enough to convince people to buy your product? Why does it actually matter that you're ranking on Baidu, or you're easily found in WeChat search or things like that? Like, why does it matter?
Well, it matters because, social media marketing is an adrenaline shot. It is, it's very powerful, and it can gain a lot of awareness in a very short period of time, but it's going to wear off very quickly. And so if your target audience didn't see it in those couple of days when the post was hot, then it's essentially dead content after that. And, from my perspective, that's a waste. You've just paid a lot and created something special, and engaged with a KOL, and that whole process is extremely time consuming, and KOLs are very expensive. And so this, to me, is low hanging fruit. I mean, you're already doing it, so you might as well just optimize it. And another aspect of that, there was some really cool research that was pointed out by Walk the Chat recently in an article they did. I think it might have been on Xiaohongshu or something like that. But they took they had some data from, I think, McKinsey or some research company that said that the typical Chinese customer actually requires more touch points in their buyer's journey. And so the typical Western buyer, a customer, requires about like 6 to 7 touch points before they're convinced to, buy or make some sort of transaction with a company, where the Chinese require like 8 to 9. And that's pretty significant. And so just because the KOL has talked about you and generated awareness and interest and, influenced some amount of trust and authority in your brand and transferred some of that to their audience, it doesn't mean that audience is automatically going to go and transact. They're going to, as much as they might trust and love their favorite KOLs, they want to validate that this is the right decision to make. And so they're going to likely use other search engines to research and figure out, is this the right decision to make? And also just the fact that maybe it's not even a research thing, but you want to be visible as much as possible, as often as possible, to your target customer. And how much better is it, kind of in my mind, that you can write, you can write about yourself, and you can publish, PR releases about, your products, or or on your own website or publish your own content. But again, you're talking about yourself. And so if that searchable content is a trusted authority who's an expert in makeup or fashion or, a fitness guru or something like that, and they're talking about you and they're publishing something and that's the article that comes up, in my mind, and I think in the mind of many customers, that's actually a more convincing and interesting story that becomes part of that journey that the buyer makes to purchase.
Definitely. I mean, I think that it's extremely important for credibility and for building a brand's reputation. I mean, I think the worst thing is, if somebody gets all excited about your product after seeing a KOL, talk about it, and then they go to learn more about it and they can't find anything on it. Like that's their interest is going to be totally squashed, even if they love the, like you said, even if they love the KOL, they're just going to be like, that's not going to fly. Totally. So I think that it's really important for credibility that brands focus on also on the SEO, and this is, like you said, a great way to repurpose content instead of just starting fresh with trying to do the SEO and everything.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, one point we kind of skipped. I kind of skipped over too is the other really, really big one is ESO, is e-commerce search engine optimization. The e-commerce platforms, they're also content platforms and social platforms, and they most of them provide brands with the ability to publish their own content and videos and live streams and such. And all of that content that you're having a KOL produce, no matter where it's at, it should be repurposed across all of these platforms because it can be optimized for search, which I'm forgetting the statistics on it, but when it comes to product searches, more so than anywhere in the world, and I know it's a very, very high percentage of product searches start on e-commerce platforms. They don't start on Baidu. They don't start on social. They actually start on Taobao, Tmall, JD. And so if you have that search engine optimized content, you have a chance of popping up and coming up in their search. And then you also have really nice content that's integrated nicely with your store. And if someone wants to learn more about your products or what, experts or fashionistas or whatever are saying about your brand and about your products, it's right there. And so again, like it's just part of a more holistic approach to KOL marketing and trying to, please and satisfy and become more visible.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. And so I had forgotten about that piece too. But yeah, e-commerce search is definitely very important.
And now it's time for this week's PARKLU Influencer Marketing Insights. Many brands are missing a big opportunity in the age of social media. They are not connecting with their customers by providing value first via educational and entertaining content that builds communities, so influencers are filling that gap. The luxury travel agency Xanadu thought outside the customer relationship box to build their own influencer. One of the co-founders of Xanadu was traveling in New Zealand when he met a young Chinese tour guide who shared she would be hiking for 4 months from Mexico to Canada. Recognizing the unique opportunity, Xanadu sponsored her journey. By the end of the trip, she had produced 38 videos and accumulated more than 10 million video views across several Chinese video platforms, and gained over 30,000 Weibo followers. It doesn't make sense for any single brand to try and serve the limitless range of interests their customers might have, but it does make sense to support the people that do. This is a truly interesting case where a brand was able to develop an influencer of their own and serve their target audience something truly special. For more insights and articles from PARKLU, visit chinainfluencermarketing.com/PARKLU. I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Okay, well, I kind of want to wrap up that topic and kind of switch gears and talk more about some, I guess, recent news, some things that have been going on just kind of in the China social media space, and just things that some brands should be aware of. So I'd like to start off by talking about recently there's a lot of been some news and kind of negative, well, not kind of negative, very negative news about Weishi, which is Tencent's short video platform, and Weishi was actually around in, I think, 2013. It was a little bit popular back, a couple of years ago, and then the platform just kind of completely disappeared for a while. And then I think Tencent saw what was going on with Douyin, and they decided to just revamp Weishi and bring it back out and see if it could become a competitor to Douyin. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if it was rumors or if it was actually an official announcement, but there was a lot of people saying that Tencent and Weishi were investing a lot of money into kind of bringing the platform back to life and, recruiting talent to the platform and marketing the platform and everything. And then and I saw that in a lot of the WeChat groups I'm in. I know companies that are working with Tencent or Weishi, and then recently, that's been a couple months now, and then now people are saying that it was all a scam and that they were promised all this money to go over to Weishi and start, sharing content on the platform, and then they're not getting paid for it. And there's this kind of uproar and all this confusion. And so I would just like to get your take on kind of what's going on and kind of what are some implications of this.
Well, so this whole trend of, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit from some Weishi to give a little context. One of the ways that Douyin hypergrowthed their platform was they understand this, I think, better than anybody does or did, that it's the content creators, it's actually the KOLs that attract audiences, because people are looking for fun, interesting, niche stuff to look at and to consume online. And they knew that, hey, if we get these really high-end people on here creating fun and interesting videos, we can attract not only their audiences, but more general audiences across the board. And so Douyin very cleverly had a tactic a year plus ago where they were inviting KOLs and they were paying them. I think at times it was like just a standard monthly rate, like, hey, you produce whatever, a video a day kind of thing, and we'll pay you 3,000 renminbi a month, or they would pay per video. Well, this tactic worked extremely well for them, obviously. It jump-started where they're at today. I don't think that they really need to pay any influencers directly, even though I believe they still have the same program on. They don't need to actively do this. It's quite a healthy platform, very, very healthy. So this concept has become, kind of famous. And here's what I think happened. And someone might, correct me along the way, but here's my understanding of it. So all of these different platforms, actually, but Tencent and this Weishi platform say, Tencent put out a thing, hey, we want to get into this live video or this short video thing. We are going to be investing 3 billion renminbi into the platform and to make this thing move fast. We are going to, and then a subset of that wasn't quite as pushed out into news is we're going to be recruiting influencers and KOLs to create content creators for the platform, which makes sense. However, what I think happened is the fake, that's where the real news ends and the fake news begins. And the fake news is that these agencies and MCNs, multi-channel networks, grabbed onto that and started spreading rumors that Weishi was paying for content, and that they were paying KOLs and they were paying content creators for content that they would create, and that you would get. And Maggie, during this period, I think she had she said she had 8 different agencies and multi-channel networks contact her to publish content on there. And we were actually very, very close ourselves to starting to produce content for these platforms, because it was a pretty good deal. It was like, I don't know, you publish, a 10-second video and you get paid, 300 renminbi. And it's like, well, that's pretty easy money. Like $50 for 10 seconds of your time doesn't seem like, it seems like a pretty good deal.
And also a lot of these agencies and stuff were not only saying that we're going to pay you, but at least from my experience, a lot of them were saying that they also have connections with Tencent and that they would be able to push your videos so that your videos actually got more views. So it was like, okay, so you're paying me by the views, but then you're also going to help me get views. Like, how could this deal be any better?
Oh, correct. And they weren't even saying, the MCNs and the agencies weren't saying, we're going to pay you for this. They were saying Tencent is paying for this. We're going to, pay for this. And we have these connections. We're going to push you. And so what they were getting these KOLs to do is sign contracts with them and agreements to say, okay, now you're part of our agency. Now you're part of our MCN. And they were essentially scamming them. They were tricking them into believing that they were going to be paid for this content. And because Tencent had already released all this news about investment and recruiting influencers, then all these MCNs, these really, I have a really big problem with the MCNs and agencies. I've only had bad experiences personally, and I've only really, in general, had heard bad experiences, because what these MCNs do, and it's just, again, they recruit en masse. And then they focus only on the unicorns, and essentially everybody else gets left to fend for themselves. They get no support. They don't really get what they're promised the world. They get nothing but dirt. And so this was a way for these MCNs and agencies to recruit en masse and promise them again the world, and then in the end kind of blame it on Tencent. And I do have to say a little bit about Tencent in this case, because this was pretty widely known that there was a lot of influencers that started signing. I mean, you and I are in some of these groups, and we know some of our friends were signing up and that we're doing this. And so what they're doing then is they're scamming them. And what was I going to say? Sorry. Tencent, though, did not refute these claims that the MCNs were making, kind of until it was time to pay up.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of sucks. And I do, from a business strategic standpoint, it's good for them, because they got a whole bunch of content creators and a whole bunch of really fresh, interesting content on the platform. But they didn't admit, or they didn't call out this fake news until it was time to pay up, until, people were saying, hey, where's my money? And people were getting a little bit upset. And they said, oh, well, we never said that. That wasn't an agreement with us. That's fake news. It's like, oh, well, now you say it. Now that you have all this content, now that you have all these creators on here, and kind of just, I don't know, like kind of nasty business ethics all the way around. And, I feel horrible being a content creator myself, and someone who's slaved away at that, at this for years now, and, with little to no pay at times. And, for people that are just starting out or something, like, that's a pretty big blow. That it's a tough market to be in anyways. And then to maybe have this place where you're like, oh, I'm going to create stuff, and, this is going to be an okay income, and this might be the start for me of something big. And then to find out that you were totally scammed, that just sucks. And I feel really, in the end, it's really taking advantage of creators, and they already have a disadvantage in their field. And so really it's kind of sad.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I think it was, I think you had shared an article in some WeChat groups, and they had some quotes from some influencers who had been dealing with this problem, and how some people, had literally produced hundreds of videos over the past couple of months, and they received, they thought that they were going to be getting, because some of the money that these agencies were telling people they were going to get, it was ridiculous. Honestly, it was a little bit
pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that
one of the quotes like 30,000 renminbi, like $5,000. a month kind of thing that they thought they were going to make, or maybe even more.
Yeah,
Some of the numbers were pretty high.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the thing is like this is kind of different than what I was going to say, but I think that yes, like a lot of these influencers did get scammed, and I feel really bad for them. And I think that, I mean, even like you said, like Maggie dealt with this. I had, people approach me, and I've just been, busy with some other stuff lately, and just, I'm just not too into the whole like 10-second video thing at the moment. So I was just kind of, cause I was considering it, but I think that the people that were approaching me were giving kind of reasonable price ranges. They were saying like there are different levels, and if you get this many views, you're going to get paid this much, this many views, this much, there's different tiers, and the prices were pretty like believable. They were reasonable. They were like, okay, well, this is worth my time. But I'm not going to become like rich from this, there's a limit. Yeah. But then some of the, in that article, it seems like some of these agencies and MCNs were just giving these ludicrous amounts that was like, I don't know how as a KOL you could believe that would be like possible, that they're actually going to pay you that much for like, I don't know. So I also think that, some of these people, because they and obviously this is just coming from, from one article. But I just know that this is also just true in China, that people will, like they mentioned, there was this one girl who had racked up a lot of followers on Douyin, but because Douyin can kind of be unpredictable sometimes, whether or not you're going to, get a lot of views on one video and then not a lot on another. And so she saw this as an opportunity for some more stable income. And so she just like completely abandoned Douyin and her pretty large following there, and then just jumped over to Weishur. And I think that there was, for some of these people who got really burned in this situation, there was also a little bit of irresponsible decision making, because there's a lot of people who we're saying like content creators, I think is a better way to refer to them, as opposed to, because they're not KOLs, they're not influencers, they're just chasing money and the next big platform. And really, a responsible KOL is going to have followings on multiple platforms, and maybe they think that Weishur is a good idea, but they're still going to keep developing their following on their key platforms while they try out Weishur. So maybe, obviously it would have sucked if you spent all this time making all these Weishur videos and then you didn't get paid for it, but you would still have your following on other platforms, So I do think it was a little bit irresponsible for some of these people to be like, just go all in on it when they still had followings on other platforms and they didn't do anything to maintain
100%. It was naive. But at the same time, the modern day content creator is a very young person that's very inexperienced with life in general, let alone work and agencies and how this potentially works. And everybody's, kind of get, money symbols and stars in their eyes kind of thing. And so it's pretty easy to get sucked in and hope that something magical is going to happen. And, again, you're talking about people that they're just not that experienced, and they just don't have life experience. And I just know too many people who have been sucked in with agencies and have had pretty bad experiences. And so that's my number one warning when any KOL comes to me and says, hey, should I do this? Working with an MNC or an agency, and I'd say, I'm going to tell you about my experiences and some of the things that I've heard, and then you need to process this and think about this. Does this really make sense to you? And I think that, that's what it comes down to. You just have a lot of, again, creators, not influencers, who are trying to make, kind of make a quick buck, but also, they're trying to develop careers, and they don't really understand what developing a career really means.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that when I was really heavily into live streaming. They have a very similar business model as far as giving you like paying you to come to platforms, and you just would see people jump from platform to platform to platform, always chasing the next best thing, and then they would abandon their original platform, and it was like, just stick it out.
I know. Yeah, you got to have a long game approach, and I think that it's hard for most people to think that way. And they're just not experienced enough to really understand what it means to be an influencer. And I think that's one of the, well, I don't want to get too much off onto a tangent, but that's one of the things that's happening right now with the rapid growth of these different platforms and also short video and such, is we're really getting into content creators that are able to create really massive and really great awareness for themselves and for their content and potentially for their brand collaborations, but they're not influencers in the traditional sense of someone who has developed relationships with people around niche topics of interest that are providing entertainment or educational value. That's we don't really see that yet on these short video platforms.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very important distinction. I just want to kind of wrap this up, but I was just, do you think now that all of this has kind of happened, do you think that a lot of these people are probably going to leave Weishi and go back to whatever platforms they were on before? I mean, it seems to me, this seems kind of like Tencent kind of screwed up with trying to bring Weishi back to life.
I think so too. I think, again, the value is in the content creators, the people who really are willing to spend, half a day to create a 10-second video. You don't want to screw those people over. Those are the real value propositions of any great content platform. And so when you piss off those people, you've made a big mistake. And I think that Tencent made a mistake in not addressing this fake news early, because they had to have known that it was going on. They 100% had to have known it was going on. There was more than just rumors. There was stuff being published about it and agents and all of that stuff. And they should have addressed this really early on, because it is going to make some people really unhappy. And I 100% they're going to be they're probably going to leave and be disenchanted with the whole thing. And I don't know how they're doing on the regular, regular user growth, but I do know that if they don't have those high quality content producers, you're going to have a really tough time.
Yeah, especially when it's not like the space is open and they're trying to form something new. They're trying to compete with, Douyin and Kuaishou, which are already very, dominant in this space. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to do that without content creators.
Well, and with Douyin's growth, and I still think they have a lot of room for growth. There's still a lot of room for new creators to come up in the ranks. And so you might as well, abandon ship on this one that's kind of treated you poorly and get back on the one that's already in a hyper growth type of scenario.
Yeah, definitely. I think this well, speaking of Douyin, it kind of ties into the next topic that we wanted to talk about. Which, and it kind of ties also into, people jumping from platform to platform. I think China's kind of created this environment because between, new companies coming and going, and also what, government input into these social media platforms, it can be really unstable as an influencer. And people are often trying to just, make a quick buck and then get out, or just move on to the next big thing for a lot of these, like you said, content creators, not necessarily influencers. But so that kind of leads me into talking about how over the past couple of months, 2 months or so, there's just been a lot of, I guess you could call it content crackdowns, or maybe just government intervention and some cleanups that have been going on a lot of platforms, and just content regulation in general.
It's been really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know where you'd like to start, but I mean, there's several different, there's Meipai, Douyin you were mentioning before we started about the rap of China. I think there's a lot going on in this topic.
I know. And, and it's really like, it seems like it kind of comes in surges. And I actually saw a really good, I made a comment in another WeChat group where I was like, I do not understand these government rules. And someone else commented, they're like, yeah, there's a reason they make it so vague. It's so that they can crack down when they feel appropriate. And when, if there's rigid lines, then it's easy maybe to skirt those or something. But if everything's really gray, then they can come in and say, nope, we don't like that, and we're going to penalize you or take that down or delete the account or whatever. And Douyin's had some real big, Toutiao and Douyin, BitDance in general, they've had some big problems the last couple of months, from fake news to, I think one of the really bad ones recently was the Douyin did a negative take on some sort of World War II type Chinese military hero, and it was incorporated into an ad, and somehow it negatively portrayed him or something. I'm just like, when I hear that kind of stuff, I'm just like, oh, what were you thinking? Even if there wasn't some sort, and it was only like a month prior that the government said, hey, you're not allowed to talk about military heroes or these types of things. And then a month later, they come out with this content. I'm like, I know sometimes when you go through this stuff, there's decision makers though that approve these things, and it's like, how did this slip through the cracks? How do you let this kind of stuff go out there? This is stuff that you can not just get spanked for, but you could have your entire platform shut down.
Yeah, I mean, and they did like not shut down, but like not even a month before that, like when the whole Toutiao and ByteDance, when a lot of platforms were getting looked into, and I remember there was like a couple days where Douyin wasn't allowing people to like update new videos, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like
they shut down, I think, live streaming or something too.
Right. It's like, this has just happened. Like, shouldn't you be more aware?
You should be really, really careful. And then there was and we don't even know the whole story behind it, but there was some total, almost a week-long kind of shutdown, crackdown on Maypai, where they were even deleting videos and or limiting the visibility, and really, they also went through some sort of rebranding campaign recently, or rebranding the app. But I think Maypai's in a really tough spot right now. Their usage is probably way down, and I know a lot of the influencers, creators have abandoned the platform to some degree. But yeah, it's really, really strange. And so, what that does, for brands is that creates a lot of vulnerability in your, in your marketing dollars and in your campaigns that you're potentially launching with creators. Is you could have invested quite a bit of time and resources into content that, maybe once it goes live, it gets shut down, or it can't be published, in your time sensitive range for your product launch or for your live event or something like that. And it's something that brands really, really need to be aware of and have their finger on the pulse of what is happening on these platforms, because there is a constant, it really seems, especially for the last 3 months, that there's been a constant kind of tremor taking place and a shakeout.
And I think that besides just being aware, I think that brands need to have a mindset, that what can go wrong will go wrong. This is something that when I used to work at a PR company and we were doing events, this was just something that we would say to clients over and over again. We have spent so much time with you and planning everything as perfectly as we can, but you just need to have, this is China and things are going to go wrong. We don't know what, but something is going to go wrong. You know what I mean? And then this is something that we used to talk to clients a lot about, is no matter what, we could be paying attention to the news every second of every day, but we couldn't have predicted some of this stuff happening. So you just need to have this mindset that something might happen, and we'll figure it out when it does happen. But just know that this stuff does happen in China.
Correct. And you need to be really aware of too, there was obviously something aligned with the classic, whatever, June 5th kind of date kind of stuff, where you just need to know when you're going to be running campaigns, you need to not run them around sensitive parts and sensitive dates and sensitive subjects and such. And just be really aware. It's better to err on the side of, what would the Chinese government call it? Some sort of moral, moral goodness, than do something that's a little bit risky, that might get you into hot water, because it's just not worth it. Because the government and the powers that be, they just don't have any mercy, and they have no reason to have any of it. And so, like, you're just really, really important to realize that that to be aware of those types of things. And I think there's some really good signs too. I'm very, very encouraged, and I'm surprised and very encouraged that the second season of the Wrap of China is coming back. It's not exactly the Wrap of China anymore. It's been renamed and kind of rebranded and retooled, and a little bit watered down maybe in some ways, and very China-fied in other ways. I was reading an article on it, but I think it's cool too that, there is an amount of, and that they dealt very closely with the government in getting approvals for this stuff, that, hey, it's not that, it seems sometimes that it's not that the Chinese government wants to squash creativity, or wants to squash, music or cultural phenomena and things like that. It's just that they need it to line up with, certain moral stances and perspectives on the world and stuff. And as long as it does, then it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also important, something I just wanted to quickly point out is that, because we were kind of mentioning Maypai, Douyin, some of these apps, but I think that it's important to point out that Weibo and WeChat aren't, the big players aren't exempt from these problems either. So
No.
don't think that, if you that you're playing it safe by, just sticking to WeChat and Weibo, because, in the recent couple of months, the Hot Topics page on Weibo was frozen for a couple of days. And, that's something that a lot of, obviously a big part of a Weibo campaign is to have a hashtag, like a hot topic, and try and get, that to be as visible as possible to increase the results of the campaign. And so if you were planning a campaign at that time, that, that would have affected it. And then, WeChat has I don't know if in this specific one, I forget if they had any areas, but I know that, over the past year or so that they've had, accounts deleted and things cracked down as well. So I just want to point out that it's not just these up and coming or smaller, platforms or whatever, it's the big ones are affected by it too.
Oh, absolutely. And what's going to happen, for good or for bad, is a lot of these platforms are going to do a lot more self-monitoring and self-censoring. And so if there's any amount of risk in the content there, I really think that you can have whole accounts suspended and deleted just in, for one violation kind of thing, because they cannot risk the entire ecosystem for, your stupid statement kind of thing. And so, like, that's really, really important, to know that the big platforms are doing it, and these growth platforms. And, we had kind of talked about that, one of the reasons I think that Douyin and Toutiao are having such big problems and in the news so much right now is because they've grown so fast that, you and I had talked about a little bit earlier, that our own personal interactions with trying to talk with the right people internally and have conversations and deal with them has been a nightmare. And it's really just because I think they've grown so fast that internally they're just a mess right now. They're just, they're hiring and trying to get, I'm sure they're working more than the classic Jiu Liao. Like, they're just like cranking away 24/7 to try and keep up with their own growth.
Definitely. And things are going to slip through the cracks when that happens.
Exactly. Yeah. But I have confidence that the self-monitoring thing will become increasingly important, and they just won't deal with anything. And so brands and KOLs need to be really aware before they publish content to not put anything potentially sensitive in there, and just keep everything in the lines.
Which can be tough because, obviously if you're trying to be creative and eye-catching, sometimes that can, especially in Western countries anyway, that can be things that are eye-catching or, get people to talk about are also a little bit sensitive too. So I think people just, that just adds another level of complexity to your China social media marketing.
Exactly.
It wasn't complex already.
I know. Gosh, totally.
Well, awesome. I mean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. We could go on forever about some of these topics, and I'm sure that in another couple months from now, I'll have you back on to talk about more things because things just
love to
changing so quickly around here. It's like there's never no end to things to talk about.
Nope, not at all. Yeah, no, it's a real pleasure to be on. I always say this in podcasts, but it's super therapeutic for me to be able to come on and talk about this stuff. There's not too many KOL nerds out there, and so it's fun to nerd out for an hour. Definitely.
And I know you've provided this before, but if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They should just add me on WeChat. They can use my full name, all one word, Elijah Whaley, or even use my phone number, which is 135-2150-0226.
Okay. Awesome. Helping people get in touch with you easily.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and hope everybody takes something away from this.
Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Elijah. I realized that I did not even give Elijah a chance to introduce himself. He's already been on the podcast 2 times, and I was just so anxious to get started talking about all these super interesting topics that I totally forgot to give him a chance to introduce himself. So Elijah is the CMO of PARKLU, which is China's premier influencer marketing agency. And if you want to know more about him, you can go back and listen to his 2 previous episodes, or you can just check out his LinkedIn or just get in touch with him to learn more. So I'm sorry, Elijah, for not giving you a chance to introduce yourself, but anyway, so you can find his contact info and links to the things that we mentioned in the episode in the show description or in the show notes on chinainfluencermarketing.com. Again, if you liked this episode and know somebody else who might like it too, don't forget to share it. Thanks, and talk to you next week.